I thought we could just talk all about sort of assassinations in general, or the mind of an assassin. Look a little bit more at the guy and other historical precedents and all that sort of thing. Now, the first thing that struck me was the age of this kid. And he is a kid, 20 years old, a little more than a child, not old enough to buy a beer in America.
See, that's why I'm suspicious about it, because not a good shooter, someone who may well be fairly easily led because he's not a very popular guy, and it's not like the FBI doesn't have a history of doing this kind of grooming. So I have to say I don't know anything, but I'm deeply suspicious.
Are you going to say something, Josh?
Yeah. I mean, he'd only left college 2 months prior to shooting him, and you'd think you put all that work in and all of a sudden you're assassinating the president. It seems a bit strange to me.
Ambitious?
Well, yeah. Now, I don't want to be unnecessarily rude to the younger members of our audience, but when you're 20, you're still a kid.
Yeah, we were 20.
You're basically still a kid. Yeah. I mean, I'm 43, going to be 44 next month. So I'm just old enough, really, to look back at when I was in my 20s and realised I didn't know anything, but I thought I knew everything.
Yeah.
Right? The idea that Socrates says, be aware of how little you know. I'm more and more aware of that the older I get.
Yeah.
More and more aware of it. But I remember when I was 17, when I was 19, when I was 25, I thought I knew everything. I thought I had everything down. Right?
Yeah.
It's a common thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's sort of the arrogance of youth.
I'll stay quiet then.
Oh, sorry. You're older than that. You're only 30, yeah?
28.
You're knocking 30. You're all right. No, but
Thank you.
I was going to say, assassinations is a young man's game.
Is it?
Yeah, surprisingly so. I've noticed this before. This isn't my insight. It's been noticed before. Not all assassins are young, but a lot of them are. A great deal of them are. John Wilkes Booth, the killer of Lincoln, was 26 at the time. And his co-conspirators were 30 years old, 23, 27, and the other two were 21 years old.
Really?
Because more than Lincoln was killed on that day.
Yeah.
There was a whole gang of them, really.
Yeah.
One exception is the assassin of James Garfield in 1881. Charles Guiteau was 40. Now, that's one of the oldest. Yeah, that's one of the. In fact, if anyone out there can find any examples of anyone over about 45 that ever did an assassination, they're nearly all in their 20s. Nearly all in their 20s against a young man's game, because I think there's a specific type of psychology going on. One, that you probably feel like a loser, and the fast track to getting your name in the history books is to do a political assassination.
Herostratus style.
Yeah.
There's
you don't care if
few examples of that, isn't
you
there?
don't care if you go down in history for being good or achieving something positive. Yeah. Well, I'll be a baddie then.
I know.
And also being violent, young men, sort of prone, obviously. It's not.
Much.
I know that the guy who assassinated John Lennon did it specifically for the notoriety and the fame from it. That was his justification for doing it, explicitly.
Mark David Chapman was 25 when he did that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, let me just run through a few. The guy that killed William McKinley in 1901, he was 28. Lee Harvey Oswald was 24 years old, if you believe the official account of that murder, which I don't, although I do think Lee Harvey Oswald was involved in some way. Right. I think he was exactly what he said he was, a patsy, but the fingerprints of intelligence were all over Lee Oswald. Anyway, he was 24. The guy that tried to, or did shoot unsuccessfully to Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 after he'd been president. In fact, talk about being a Chad or a badass. After Roosevelt was shot, Teddy Roosevelt, and survived, he says it takes more than that to take down like a bull like me.
Yeah.
It was like,
didn't he give a speech afterwards as well?
I don't know. He might have done.
I remember
I'm pretty
hearing
sure
that.
he had the bullet in him and he still gave a speech.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan's would-be assassin, John Hinckley Jr., was 26. Reagan also was pretty badass. He got badly shot in that.
He got, wasn't it 8 shots?
Yeah, he was shot up pretty bad, like through the torso and stuff. And he went into hospital for like a day or 2 or 3, something like that. And anyway, long before he really should have left hospital, and he was no spring chicken, he just left hospital and was like, I'm fine, don't worry about it. Yeah.
Okay.
I imagine, being Ronald Reagan, you get some good doctors though, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
I'd be a massive baby about it.
Yeah.
I'd milk it for all it's worth.
Yeah.
So I'm in hospital for months now. Sorry.
Yeah, you said, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but you said it was like a very minor wound Trump got. It didn't look all that minor to me. I wouldn't want a bullet go through.
Oh, no.
I'm sure it hurts, but like it's just in the cartilage.
In the grand scheme of
grand scheme of
assassinations.
things. Right, yeah. That's a little more than a graze, isn't it? Gavrilo Princip, arguably the most famous assassin of all time, perhaps not including Lee Harvey Oswald, was 19 years old when
So
he killed
young.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife in 1914. Just shy of 20 he was. Again, there's this thing, when you're that young, you don't know what you're doing, what you're talking about. You don't know your own mind. It's very dangerous when you get a violent young man that thinks he's got absolute certainty in things. That's a dangerous recipe. Very much so. The guy that killed Yitzhak Rabin in 1995 was 25 years old. Sirhan Sirhan, who shot RFK, if you believe that narrative, was only 26 years old. I mean, RFK, the bullets that killed him were from his own bodyguard, but we'll pass over that.
I don't know anything about these conspiracies.
The killers of Anwar Sadat, the Egyptian leader, were 26 and 29. Mark Chapman was 27. The guy that killed Trotsky,
25.
27. It was 25, sorry. Mark David Chapman was 25. The guy that killed Trotsky was 27. The assassins of Reinhard Heydrich were 28 and 29. See, there's a sweet spot. It's in your 20s. It's a young man's game. The killers
Still in for it.
Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, were 22 and 25. Now, there are a few exceptions, though. John Bellingham, who famously killed one of our Prime Ministers, Spencer Perceval, he was 42. And it's the oldest one I can really find. I'm sure there are examples. And anyone out there can find any, do let us know in the comments or whatever. Let me know. I'd be interested.
Samson's putting one in there for you now.
Is he?
Mm-hmm. One of the exceptions.
Oh, yeah,
to
the
the
guy
rule.
that killed, Shinzo Abe was in his early 40s, 41. James Earl Ray, who apparently killed Martin Luther King, was 40 years old. The killers of Gandhi, the Mahatma, they were in their 30s. But a lot of killers, whether assassins or otherwise, are quite often guys in their 20s. Because, like I say, it's that sweet spot of being impulsive and violent and being absolutely convinced the righteousness of your cause out of an ignorance or out of a lack of perspective. For example, the 7/7 killer, the 7/7 bombers in Britain, their leader, Mohammed Sadiq Khan, which is his real name, was 30 years old, but the other three were 22, 19 and 18 years old. Shazid Tanweer, Jermaine Lindsay and Hasib Hussein. If you look at the 9/11 killers, if you believe that narrative, their leader, Mohammed Atta, was 33. And the ages of the rest of them, if I'll just spiel them off, were 22, 28, 22, 25, 23, 24, 22, 20, 22, 29, 26, 24, 25, 20, 26, 20, 23 and 21. So the idea of being an assassin or a suicide killer or even just an infantryman in the army,
But also,
they need you young.
But also a revolutionary, right? Because I saw the other day the ages of the people involved in the American Revolution. George Washington was the oldest at 44.
Right.
The rest of them were in their 20s, and some of them are teenagers.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, this is wild.
Because if you can get a young guy, the late teens or in their 20s, you're impressionable at that age.
Yeah.
You're sort of, you're open to be manipulated.
But you're also active.
But also capable of doing extreme things.
Yeah.
Even
Right.
Joseph Stalin was robbing banks in his, late teens, early 20s for the Communist Party, wasn't he?
Well, if you look at a lot of school shooters from Columbine onwards, sometimes they are actually children.
Yeah.
Actually children. Or boys that are old enough to do extreme violence, but young enough to not really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Not really. Assassination is not an old man's game. 50, 60-year-olds, just they don't do. You get more, you know what it's like when you get a bit older, you become a bit more sort of que sera about things.
Yeah.
You're not going to go around sniping people you don't like.
So
It's just not going to happen.
This leads us on to the point of I always find it strange that American presidents got assassinated, right? Like he's there for 4 years, maximum of 8 years.
Yeah, just wait.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's not going to be around forever. Like it's more dangerous to be an American president than a European monarch. right? There are way more assassinations and assassination attempts against, one country's president than an entire continent's monarchs who are going to be there for life. So, I'm not, obviously don't assassinate anyone, but you can see how the logic would make more sense. Like, okay, I need to kill this king because otherwise I've got another 40 years of this.
Right, yeah, I see, yeah.
Or I've got 4 years of this president. It's like, why would you ruin your own life? I mean, just as a pure Machiavellian calculation.
Yeah.
I just can't understand why anyone would do it.
Quite often the motivations are pretty thin.
Yeah.
So, for example, John Wilkes Booth, he was just annoyed at what Lincoln had done to the South, but the war was already over.
Yeah.
It was 1865. The war had finished. So it was out of pure resentment and spite. Or he's actually pissed off at himself that he hadn't had the balls to actually fight for the Confederacy.
But that makes more sense, right? Because there's a deeply personal investment. But a lot of them seem to be like political. It's like, oh, I don't like what this guy will do. Like this Trump assassination. I bet it's about the politics of Donald Trump, right? And so it's just like, okay, that's really weird because, again, he'd only be around for 4 or 8 years. And there's nothing stopping just another person who has the same platform from being elected on the same platform and carrying on.
But I think it's what Bo's getting at, because your brain doesn't stop fully developing around the age of about 25. That's when, your neuroplasticity, as it's called, starts to become a bit more rigid and your mind is formed, I suppose you can say, in inverted commas. And until that point, you're sort of changeable and malleable. And I think that's what happens here in a lot of cases.
And just to go back to about the motivations for the 4 presidents that have been assassinated, the guy that killed James Garfield, he was a fan of Garfield, and after Garfield became president, he went to him for a job. In those days, in the 1880s, you could literally wait and get an audience with the president.
Yeah.
And he said, I deserve a job. I want to be an ambassador. And they were like, no, we don't know you. And no, anyway, get lost. And so he decided he's going to kill the president.
Right, so personal resentment.
Yeah.
Is this a frequent driver of assassinations?
I think so, yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, sort of an inferiority complex or something. All sorts of different, there's also the whole smorgasbord of different motivations. The guy that killed McKinley was just simply an anarchist.
Right, so that's political.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Maybe this is just pure speculation. This kid was bullied in school, the potential Trump assassin, and he was purportedly quite conservative. Maybe he blames Donald Trump for being bullied, in that, he was bullied because he was saying things that conservatives were saying, and he's, the epitome of conservative politics at the minute, and he was taking out his resentment. It's obviously not a logical reason, but
it doesn't have to be logical.
Yeah,
maybe. That may be the case. Who knows what was really going through this kid's head? Not much is my thinking. There's one example. There's so many examples of this sort of thing. But one thing that struck me once, there was the Mumbai attacks in the 2008 or something, I think it was, if anyone remembers those. There's all sorts of multiple prongs of attacks in Mumbai by Islamists in India. And one of them was at a hotel. And the handlers, the sort of masterminds that set that up, used really young people, as always, sort of young, violent men who sort of easily manipulated. And some of them were in the hotel and they're actually talking to their handlers on mobile phone, I think. And they were so sort of unworldly, so sort of know nothing, that they were walking around this big plush hotel in Mumbai and they couldn't believe that there was such a thing. Like in a plush hotel lobby, because they were rural Pakistanis that come from absolute poverty. Yeah. And all they'd had smashed into their head was the ideology that why they did that thing. And they see this hotel in Mumbai and they sort of couldn't quite believe it.
What's interesting is there was an Indian Muslim terrorist who was caught because his suicide vest or something like that failed to go off. And so they were interrogating him. And I remember reading through this interrogation, just fascinated, like what was driving him to do it. And he was just, I don't want to say rational, but he had a totally rational reason. He was like, well, look, I'm going to get 72 virgins in paradise if I lead a good Islamic life. I just figured, well, why would I wait that long? I thought I'd just get there now. And it's like, right, okay, so that is just like true believer acting logically within the paradigm he's within. Just like, okay, well, he was like 17 or something. He was really young. He was just like, I just figure I'd just get there. It's like, why would I wait? It's like, what are you going to do with that, man?
And there's a version of that, right, where instead of it's an Islamic vision of heaven and 72 virgins or whatever, it's just that my name will go down in history
Yeah.
as an assassin. I will be remembered.
Yeah.
Even if it cost me my life and I'm known as a sort of an evil person.
Literally,
I'll take that.
The
I'll take that.
Herostratus position.
Yeah.
Well, you need only look at the fact that there's been plenty of reporting since of like serial killers, or even, you know, the Manson family to a certain extent, being drawn to people who are obviously immoral and bad. And that is communicated, you know, these groupies to serial killers are well known, and people who don't really have much in the way of social status may see that and think, well, that's desirable to me.
This guy seems like a typical loser case that thought the best way to sort of make any sort of impression in the world is to do something despicable.
Yeah.
It seems to me that's probably what was going on in his mind, but probably convinced himself that it was the righteous thing to do, that it will make Rachel Maddow happy or whatever.
We'll probably find out in the coming days.
So the last thing to say is that just in general, that it is sort of, I wasn't that surprised to see that he was 20 years old.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, wow, that's remarkably young. Where did he get the sort of guts to do something like that? It was like, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, he's just about big and strong enough to climb on a roof and point a rifle at something, and sort of callow enough to actually do it. So there you go.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast to the Lotus Eaters. And if you want to see what else we're up to, you can follow Connor's series, Tomlinson Talks, where he has a deep dive on Westminster politics. Here he's talking about Labour's plan to abolish Britain. If you want to see all of the other things that we're putting out, you can follow us on Twitter, and we always post links to all of the work going out. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.